You can't put the ruins of Sierra Blanca behind you fast enough. You pick up your pace as the morning sun begins to crest over the distant mountains in the direction you are headed. As a lone traveler, you don't want to linger in a pre-collapsed town of any decent size, but the path eastward to Arispe cuts straight through Sierra Blanca, and you don't have enough supplies to take a longer way around. You can already hear the place waking up, with the rough revving sound of the raiders' cobbled-together vehicles coming to life with the dawn. You can't help but feel that you are already being watched from one of the windows of the half-collapsed buildings on the outskirts of town, as you do your best to keep low and to the side of I-10. The smaller, more out-of-the-way settlements you travel between, like the one you're headed to now, is different. No raiders or crazies to worry about there. The people of Arispe, like in the dozen or so other places you frequent, survive more through grit and skills other than force of arms, though they are rarely completely defenseless. You help them, and in return, they give you enough rest to get on to the next town. You owe Arispe a check-in, as it has been months since your last visit. You lick your chapped lips, but your tongue is just as dry and as rough as rattlesnake skin. You stop and reach for your canteen instinctively. It's much too light as you lift it high, as if hoping the extra distance would help extract more than the last remaining trickle of cool water from the titanium. Only 5 miles or so left to Arispe, you tell yourself, reassuringly, in a cracked voice. You can almost hear your son begging you to let him go alone. How you could help more settlements in less time if the two of you would just split up. Didn't matter in the end. Even together, you hadn't been able to save him. You wonder if things might have been different if you'd let him go to Arispe and the other settlements on his own. You shake your head free of the thought as you wipe sweat from the stubble that frames your glistening face. You trudge on, your old leather boots scraping against the dusty ground as you push eastward. As you continue along the old highway, your eyes adjust to see a portion of I-10 that has collapsed, forming a long gully wash. You wish you could spare the moisture in your mouth to spit. Chasms like this one had spread around the Chihuahuan Desert from the torrential rains that had become more frequent after the great disasters. You approach the edge where the asphalt and concrete have split and cracked into large chunks. As you peer over the side, you're stunned to see how deep the wash goes, with a smooth sand-like grid at the bottom, weaving through what was once solid ground. It goes off in both directions as far as you can see. Portions of the road in front of you make it the best place to cross. Looking for good purchase for your feet to cross down into the wash, you step onto the side of a dead creosote bush along the edge. Its lifeless arms reaching toward the sky, it crumbles away at your boots with a crunch. Too much water or too late, you wonder. You look down once more for the best path across as your eyes widen in surprise, and you spot a thin stream of water off to the side of the center of the wash, hidden by rocks and newly growing green grasses. It's an unusual contrast in the Chihuahuan Desert in the fall. Zacaton or Tabosa, you guess. You remember the rains passing through a month ago when you were further west and wonder if they had made this wash and collapsed the road, the grasses springing up soon thereafter. It didn't matter. You had water now. You take care not to tumble down and injure yourself, but you can barely contain your excitement as you half slide and walk down the loose sides of the gully. You're relieved to see the water moving slowly and not stagnant. Seems clean and clear enough. You pull a well-worn water filtration straw from a pocket alongside your leg. Only by luck and perhaps a touch of laziness had you been able to keep the device after being robbed the previous night. You remember stuffing it quickly into the available opening in your tattered pants after discovering water pooling in a barrel only a few days prior. The faded blue cylindrical straw is well past its intended use, and the filthy-looking filter inside feels much heavier than it should, but you had no alternatives and no cookware to boil water. Place your face close to the water and place one end of the filtration device into it. You suck as hard as you can with no result. Damn it, the thing's clogged, you think. The water's so close to your mouth you consider drinking it directly, but give the straw another try. After 2 more long draws in the straw that leave you breathless, you manage to get a thick stream of water into your parched mouth. The cool sensation of the water is beyond satisfying. You drink carefully and deliberately, knowing that the straw would soon work no more. Perhaps you could get another gallon out of it. After satisfying your thirst, you sense some time using the draw to suck up enough water to fill half your canteen before it stops working entirely. You use the stream to wash the worst of the grime from your face and hands. You take off your cowboy hat and run cupped water over your head. It's a welcome relief after pushing yourself to make time all morning. As the water runs in rivulets down the back of your dusty neck, you hear something strange, a humming, and not natural sound. Your first thought is raiders. You don't want to be caught in the bottom of a gully if they're headed your way, perhaps for a resupply of water themselves. You collect your things, don your hat again, and scramble up to the other side of the wash, using a collection of large stones and fragments from the broken highway to brace your footing. As you crest the other side, you catch a glimpse of something on the horizon. Long plumes of dust rise south of I-10, headed southwest in the direction of the Quitman Mountains, behind you and south of Sierra Blanca. For a moment you stand on the edge of the gully, confused as the vehicles are headed in such a straight line that could not possibly be using any roads that you knew of. A glint of dark metal and glass catches your eye, and you instinctively duck behind a nearby rock outcropping to hide from view. Those are no raiders, you think to yourself. Raiders cobbled together old pre-apocalypse vehicles and engines, whatever they could find to run, and they generally stuck to the roads. Split branches of creosote bush and other hazards of the desert could puncture even the best tires when run through the desert haphazardly. But the vehicles you spotted had the largest tires you had ever seen, and the drivers, whoever they were, did not seem to care about the land they passed over effortlessly. Peering out from your hiding place, you watch in silence as a convoy of 4, perhaps 5 vehicles rumble past, the odd hum of engines and the churning of their tires piercing the quiet of the wasteland. It's not long before they are gone, heading in the same direction for the mountain range that was close to the border of what was once Mexico. You can feel your heart pounding in your chest as you reflect on what you've just seen. Who is in those vehicles, and where were they headed? With the convoy out of sight, you continue on your journey toward the small settlement of Arispe. Feeling the cool morning slowly turn toward noontime heat, you scan the horizon for any small building or structure that may have more residual water left from the last deluge. Perhaps there was some place overlooked in previous travels down the highway. Unfortunately, there's little but wasteland and a few structures too distant from your path to risk the diversion. Just as you've abandoned hope of obtaining more sustenance, you spot a small cluster of cactus in the distance, just south of the highway. Could some prickly pear fruits await? As you approach the cactus, your heart sinks. The pads are dark and withered, most the color of deep purple, and the only fruits are black and shriveled, littering the ground. With the dead cactus behind you, you push on toward Arispe. The journey is grueling, and every step feels like an eternity as the sun glares down upon you. But finally, when your will and energy to continue dragging your legs across the desert is nearly gone, you see the first signs of civilization in the distance southeast of I-10. The tiny settlement of Arispe lies before you. With renewed hope, you pick up your feet and quicken your steps. You reflect on your time spent with your son, planting fruit trees for these people and enjoying their limited but welcome hospitality. The village apparently owed its name to old printed maps of Texas that called out the place where they had settled as the ghost town of Arispe, and enough of the residents had thought it a good idea to revive the name for their own use. In truth, it was little more than a small collection of ranch-style homes that had been repaired enough to be livable, along with some barely passable subsistence farming. You'd done your best to teach them the ways of efficient desert farming, such as using Zuni waffle gardens and crops like amaranth, but the people of Arispe had been stubbornly ignorant and harder to teach than most. Luckily, they had a few well-tended patches of prickly pear and a surprising number of healthy javelinas in the area to hunt and help overcome their black thumbs in gardening. Still, your son had taken a liking to some of them and insisted they could be taught to survive and thrive, especially with the help of your fruit trees. As you approach the village, you're met with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of wind chimes. You raise a hand to stop the largest of a collection of dusty old bottles from swaying from rusted wires and twine. It's only then that you are sure of what had unsettled you. There are no noises of settlers going about their daily routine during midday. The hairs in the back of your neck rise as you continue toward the gathering of white houses. The stench of death catches on a tepid breeze. The midday sun beats down mercilessly as always, casting the abandoned houses and buildings in stark relief against the harsh landscape. You let out a ragged sigh through your teeth as you realize something terrible has happened. You drop your backpack to the ground beside you and gird yourself for the worst. You walk to where a half-dozen or so homes are clustered toward the center of Arispe and see a pair of legs and patchwork jeans from around the edge of an old white ranch-style house and into a clearing. More lay alongside the man. Flies buzz around the bodies, their wings filling the air with an incessant hum. Senseless death like this was hardly rare in the wasteland, but what you witness here is something new to you. There are few signs of struggle and no burnt buildings. No clothing has been ripped from the bodies of the dead, female or otherwise. Little seems to have been looted. There are no ruthless mutilations, hangings, nor any decapitations. Instead, roughly 24 bodies of settlers lie slumped peacefully, as if they were simply asleep, through the thick carpet of black flies that cover and swarm all about them that tell otherwise. You hold your nose and squint for some sign of what killed them. Was it something they ate or drank together that went wrong? Visions of rampant engineered viruses from the old world and newscasts of corpses piled in the streets haunt you for a brief moment. No. As you get close, as close as the nauseating stench will allow, you notice the telltale signs of efficient execution. Bullet holes in the forehead or just behind the ear. These good people were all murdered for some bizarre purpose after being lured out of their homes, oddly gathered together in what once made for the rough center of the small settlement. Together they built this place back up, and together they died. Arispe was a ghost town once more. You peer around and look at the homes. None of them seem to have been ransacked. You squint at the multiple tracks of clean, well-defined boot tread marks leading toward and up to the wooden steps of one of the homes. You've not seen such boot prints for years. No one had footwear like this anymore, unless they were lucky enough to stumble into an old cache. As you look around at the sandy soil in the clearing, however, you notice that they are everywhere and of varying sizes. You grab a pinch of dirt from one of the boot marks. It's still moist with cool morning dew right below the surface, but drying quickly in the sun. The tracks were about as old as the bodies, which, by the fresh looks of them and the newly gathered flies, could have only been early in the morning, perhaps when you were crossing through Sierra Blanca. An older couple lay side by side, separated a bit from the rest of the bodies. They are curled in toward one another. You recognize them even through the disgusting mask of flies. They treated your son like one of their own, a boy and a girl who were around his age in their early teens. In return, he taught them what he knew of planting and growing trees from sapling and seed, just as you had taught him. You look around for the children of the couple and notice one more odd thing as your eyes scan the entire group of gathered residents. No children are among the dead. The youngest is a man who appears to have been in his early 20s. Your initial shock turns to a boiling anger at what has happened to the people here. A creeping anxiety claws at the back of your mind, reminding you of something important and long forgotten. The gruesome scene before you clouds any clear thought. Your eyes are drawn to the row of fruit tree saplings your son planted months ago. You absently walk toward one of the leafless trees that is about half your height and grip one branch in your hand. You bend it and it breaks easily. You take your thumbnail toward the base of another and scratch the bark away. Brown underneath as well, not the dark green you'd expect from a healthy tree. You lift one up and it easily comes loose from the soil where it was planted in a Zuni-style waffle cell. There's a hint of moist, darker soil at the base of where the root ball had been, perhaps left over from the recent deluge. None of the roots had taken good purchase in the soil. They are all dead and have been for some time, most likely due to a dry spell and improper irrigation. You notice that two of the other trees further down the row appear to have been recently uprooted and broken in half, accompanied by more of the crisp tread marks of boots surrounding the plantings. You remember the vehicles that you had seen earlier in the morning, and the course they were taking. Had they just left Arispe then? You hear the sound of floorboards creaking behind you and turn toward the sound. You instinctively reach for your waist where your pistol had been and grab at air and tattered fabric. You see a woman step out of a small home that sits on a crumbling foundation of cinder blocks. Her mouth hangs open in an expression of surprise, not fear. She narrows her eyes and curses under her breath before darting back into the building. Without thinking, you rush toward the house, your heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. After bounding up 3 rickety stairs, you slow your progress to step inside cautiously. You peer into the interior, half expecting a trap as your eyes adjust to the darkness. Only a few rays of sunshine cut through the gaps in yellowed and papered-up windows, illuminating a random assortment of dusty furniture. You hear the woman's shoes thumping toward the other side of the single-story home, and you spot her as she bursts through the back door of a kitchen. The room is flooded with sunlight as she disappears outside. You follow in full stride, knocking down an impossibly high stack of pots and pans while you take a corner to avoid a heavy table, causing a terrible racket in your wake. You stumble down the back stairs and exit the home. As you emerge from the doorway, you feel a hand from behind you on your shoulder. Before you can react, you are knocked off balance from the stairs and onto the ground. You land with a thud, the breath knocked out of you. A dark-haired woman swiftly straddles you, a fierce look in her eyes. You're certain she's not one of the people of Arispe, and anger bubbles up inside of you as you wonder what part she may have played in their deaths. You struggle against her hold, but she's a tall woman and uses well all the leverage she has. Her legs are wrapped like a wiry spring trap around your waist. "Who are you and what do you want?" she demands, her voice cold and hard. She brandishes a knife that gleams brightly in the sun. You try to explain that you're there to help, but your words come out in a wheeze as she lands a punch to your stomach. "The truth or I'll gut you," she says, bringing the knife up to your throat. You gasp for air and squirm, but she keeps you pinned down. The exhaustion from your long hike has sapped your usual strength. She holds an iron grip on your shirt with an arm that is deeply tanned and muscled, wrapped in scraps of leather and metal for combat like a raider's. You relax a bit and hold up empty hands as you bide some time to recover. "I'm John," you say. "I plant fruit trees around the wastes so people can grow their own food." Her eyes meet yours with a glimmer of recognition before they're drawn to the bundle of saplings at your side. "John," she whispers. "Shit." For a second, her fingers loosen and she falters. You take advantage of her momentary lapse in control and slam her aside. She winces and cries out in pain, falling onto her back. You roll atop her and pin her to the ground. "My leg," she cries, gritting her teeth, her face a contortion of agony. "Get off my leg," she pleads, dropping the knife. As you grab it, you instantly recognize the blade. It's your own, a Bark River boon too. In another life, you'd paid a pretty penny for it, and you always kept it as clean as possible. You look down at her waist and spot the pistol strapped to her side. A familiar Smith & Wesson M&P sits in a holster, also yours. Slightly below it, you see the source of the woman's pain, what looks like a gunshot wound wrapped with a bandana that looks again suspiciously like one of your own. She glares at you through her pain with deep brown eyes. She appears to be of Mexican descent and is attractive in a hard-edged way, with a proud nose and full lips. She's in her 40s at least, and the years have been no kinder to her than they have to you. Lines crisscross her face, and a shock of white hair hangs free from the wavy black locks pulled back in a rough ponytail. Something about her eyes stirs an old recollection in the recesses of your mind, but can't put your finger on where you may have seen her before. While she could clearly handle herself in a fight, you begin to doubt that this woman had anything to do with the dead bodies in the clearing. Whoever she is, though, there's no doubt she's the one who took your gear. It all makes sense, and as if to drive home the point, your waist pouches, extra canteens, and of course your weapons are all on display, tied and buckled to her clothing. You secure the handgun at her waist with one hand and bring the knife up to her chest with the other. Give me a good reason why I shouldn't kill you right now, thief, you say, turning your head slightly to spit sandy grit and blood from your mouth. Because I didn't kill you the other day, she says defiantly, and her voice becomes a whisper, but harsher, more intense. Because those men who were here took my daughter from me. She stares up at you defiantly. I'm going to get her back, no matter what you try to do to stop me. Her words make you reel. The corpses of Arispe, the missing youth amongst them. This woman's daughter, men who were here. Pieces of a fragmented puzzle that you never comprehended until now begin to come together. Warren, you say, speaking aloud your son's name. A sickening rush of emotions washes over you and you stare dumbfounded, your gaze drawn to the Quitman Mountains off to the west. You lift yourself carefully away from the woman and extend a hand to help lift her up. She accepts grudgingly and limps with your help back over to the stairs. What changed? She asks, peering up at you through the glare of the sun as she adjusts the makeshift bandage in her leg. You can't yet say much more, but you're sure of one thing as the words tumble from your lips. I'm going with you.